This is my house. My kids are upstairs sleeping.
We need to verify your status. Do you have papers on you right now?
Papers? I'm a neurosurgeon. I own this house. I'm an American citizen. Do you have a warrant?
We don't need a warrant.
Get off
For
my car.
Dr. Wade Jacobson, a Tuesday morning off was supposed to be time with his kids before they left for school. But standing in the marble entryway of the home he'd worked 20 years to afford, he found himself staring down armed federal agents who believed that enforcement quotas mattered more than verifying an address. What you just saw was the definition of power without accountability. Armed agents demanding entry to a home without a judicial warrant, refusing to verify basic information. Now, we're going to tell you the full story and reveal the moment these agents realized they'd raided a surgeon's home looking for a man who'd been deported 6 months earlier, and how that mistake cost the federal government $8.6 million and exposed a pattern of negligence that had been terrorizing innocent families for months. If you believe no one should have their door kicked down without cause, hit that subscribe button and tell us in the comments if you've ever been profiled by law enforcement in your own neighborhood. 3 months earlier, Dr. Wade Jacobson had been standing in that same entryway, watching the moving truck pull away, and thinking that he'd finally given his family the life they deserved. At 44 years old, with a career saving lives in the city's top trauma center, Matilda, a devoted wife, and 2 bright kids, River and Gabriella, he felt like all those years of med school debt and brutal hospital shifts had been worth it. The house wasn't just a home, it was proof. High ceilings with that statement chandelier, imported marble floors, contemporary art his wife had picked out piece by piece, and a neighborhood so quiet you could hear birds in the morning. It was the kind of place where people waved at each other, where kids rode bikes in cul-de-sacs, where the biggest concern was whether to get the lawn service that came weekly or bi-weekly. Wade had imagined weekends working in the yard, his daughter's graduation photos on that grand staircase, hosting Thanksgiving dinners where his success felt real and earned. He'd used his key fob to enter the gated community dozens of times, always with a sense of pride, thinking, I made it here. Wade's mornings usually started at 4:30 a.m. with the beep of his pager. He was the kind of surgeon other doctors called when the case was too complex, when a patient's heart was failing and time was measured in minutes. His colleagues at Presbyterian Medical Center knew him as steady, brilliant man. He was the man who could repair a torn aorta while teaching residents the anatomy of compassion. He was that good. Matilda had been by his side since medical school, back when they were both drowning in textbooks and living on ramen. She'd become a school counselor, pouring the same care into troubled teenagers that Wade poured into his career. River, their 15-year-old son, had his father's focus and his mother's empathy, already talking about pre-med programs. Gabriella, 12 years old, was all fire and questions, the kind of kid who would write letters addressed to the mayor about bike lanes and recycling programs. But they were never sent, just her curiosity at work. Their neighborhood was a carefully cultivated bubble of peace. Lexington Estates sat 20 minutes north of the city. Lawns stayed green year-round, and security gates kept the world at a comfortable distance. Neighbors knew each other by first names. Sometimes block parties happened every 4th of July. The HOA sent passive-aggressive emails about holiday decorations, not crime alerts. But 20 minutes south, in the city Wade drove through every morning on his way to the hospital, things were changing. Operation Angel's Honor had launched 3 months earlier, a federal enforcement initiative that promised to crack down on immigration violations with unprecedented aggression. Wade had seen the news reports, helicopters circling apartment complexes at dawn, families separated on sidewalks, children crying as parents were loaded into vans. He'd shaken his head at the television, grateful his world was insulated from that chaos. Unknown to him, that chaos was about to come knocking. Literally. Agent Royal Harvey had been with ICE for a few months. But Operation Angel's Honor had changed the game. Quotas were up. Timelines were compressed. Arrests mattered more than accuracy. At 52, Harvey had become the kind of agent who measured success in numbers, in doors breached and bodies processed, in metrics that looked good in monthly reports sent to Washington. His team that morning consisted of Caden Rowe, a former Marine who treated every operation like Fallujah, and Christian Fuller, a rookie 3 months out of training who still asked too many questions. They'd gathered in the parking lot of a strip mall at 6:15 a.m., reviewing reports that had come through the night before. Target, Nico Schaffer, flagged for deportation 2 years earlier, last known associate at an address in Lexington Estates. Fuller had pulled up the file on his tablet, frowning at the screen. "Sir, this intel is outdated. Shouldn't we verify the current resident before we go in?" Harvey had barely looked up from his coffee. "We verify by knocking. If Schaffer's there, we bring him in. If he's not, we knock on the next door. That's how this works now, Fuller. Speed over speculation." Rowe had checked his tactical vest, adjusting the velvet on his body armor. "The address is in a gated community. Upscale. Probably hired help or relatives hiding him. We go in hard, establish control, sort it out after." No one had pulled the property records. No one had cross-referenced the address with current residents. No one had checked if Nico Schaffer was even still in the country. They had a tip. They had a quota. And they had 3 hours before the next briefing where Harvey would need to report progress. That was enough. The black SUVs rolled through the gates of Lexington Estates at 6:42 a.m., security waving them through without question. Federal vehicles carried their own authority. They parked 3 houses down from Wade's address, engines still running, exhaust curling in the cool morning air. Harvey checked his watch. In and out in 20 minutes. Rowe and Fuller flanked him as they approached the front door, boots heavy on the stone walkway. The knock was immediate and aggressive, the kind that made picture frames rattle. Wade had been refilling his coffee when he heard it, the sharp percussion of authority that didn't ask, it demanded. He set down his mug and walked to the door, Gabriella calling from the kitchen, "Dad, who's here this early?" Through the frosted glass panels he could make out shapes, multiple figures, the bulk of body armor. When Wade opened the door, the contrast was almost absurd. He stood there in his navy polo and khaki shorts, barefoot on his own marble floor, looking out at 3 men dressed for war. Tactical vests with ICE emblazoned in yellow letters, rifles held at low ready, faces hard with the kind of certainty that doesn't entertain doubt. For a split second, Wade thought there must be some emergency in the neighborhood, that they were here to warn him about something. Then Harvey spoke. "Nico Schaffer, you need to come with us. Federal agents. Step outside now." Wade blinked, his mind trying to process words that made no sense. "I'm sorry, what?" "I'm Dr. Wade Jacobson. I live here. This is my home." Harvey's hand moved to the doorframe. "Step outside, Schaffer. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." That's when Wade saw Rowe's hand move toward his weapon, and everything inside him went cold. The door exploded inward before Wade could close it, Rowe's shoulder driving through the opening with the force of a linebacker. Wade stumbled backward, his bare feet slipping on the marble as 3 agents poured into his home. Hands grabbed his arms, spinning him around, his face suddenly pressed against the wall beside his own family photos. Cold metal bit into his wrists as the handcuffs locked. "What are you doing?" Wade's voice cracked with disbelief. "I told you, I'm not Schaffer. Check my ID. It's right there on the kitchen table." Matilda appeared at the top of the stairs, her bathrobe pulled tight, terror flooding her face. "Wade." What's happening? She started down the steps and froze. Roe had his weapon raised, not quite pointed at her, but close enough. Ma'am, stay where you are. Do not move. Behind her, River and Gabriella had emerged from their rooms, Gabriella's scream piercing through the chaos. Matilda threw her arms out, pushing both kids behind her, her body a shield. Please, my children are here. Please. We don't know who you're looking for. Harvey was already moving through the house, yanking open closets, overturning couch cushions, barking orders into his radio. Subject not located. Searching premises. Fuller stood frozen near the door, his face pale, watching Wade struggle against the cuffs. I am a surgeon! Wade's voice rose to a shout. I work at Presbyterian Medical Center. Look at my ID on the table. I have lived here for 5 years. My name is Wade Jacobson. Harvey walked past the kitchen table without glancing at the wallet sitting in plain view. He disappeared down the hallway toward the bedrooms, drawers slamming, the sound of his search destroying the peace Wade had spent 2 decades building. Fuller's radio crackled to life, dispatch cutting through the chaos with a voice that sounded almost bored. Unit 47, be advised. Nico Schaffer was processed for deportation 6 months ago. Currently detained in Arizona pending transfer. Repeat, subject is not at that location. The house went silent. Harvey stopped mid-search, his hand frozen on a drawer in Wade's home office. Roe lowered his weapon slowly, his eyes cutting to Harvey. Fuller looked down at his boots, his jaw tight. Wade heard the words from where he stood cuffed in his own kitchen, his wrists burning, his children crying upstairs. You're at the wrong house. Wade's voice was quiet now, deadly calm. You broke into the wrong house. Harvey walked back into the kitchen, his face unreadable. He pulled a key from his vest and unlocked the cuffs without meeting Wade's eyes. The metal fell away and Wade rubbed his wrists, red marks already forming where the steel had bitten into skin. Harvey stepped back, not quite looking at Wade, not quite looking away. You fit the description, Harvey muttered, as if that explained anything, as if that justified everything. Wade stared at him, something cold and furious crystallizing in his chest. What description? Black man in an expensive house? That's your probable cause? Matilda was coming down the stairs now. Gabriella clutched against her side, River's hand gripped tight in hers. Wade looked at his family, at their faces, and then back at the 3 men who had just destroyed their sense of safety. I want your names, Wade said, his voice surge and steady, the kind of calm that came before precision cuts. All of you. Right now. And I want your badge numbers. Because you just made the biggest mistake of your careers. Harvey handed over a business card with his information, his fingers tight around the laminated paper. Roe and Fuller followed suit, their silence louder than any apology. They filed out of Wade's home without another word, leaving behind overturned furniture, scattered belongings, and a family that would never feel safe in that house again. Wade spent the rest of that morning on the phone. First with his hospital to explain why he wouldn't be coming in, then with attorneys, working his way through referrals until he reached Ben Bentley, a civil rights lawyer with a reputation for taking on federal agencies. Bentley listened to Wade's story, asked 3 questions, and said 2 words that Wade would never forget. We'll destroy them. Bentley brought in Alana Knight, a litigation specialist who had made her name deposing federal agents. 6 weeks later, she sat across from Royal Harvey in a conference room, the court reporter's fingers flying across the keys as Knight dismantled his defense piece by piece. Agent Harvey, did your team conduct any surveillance of the residence before the breach? No. Did you verify the current resident's identity through property records? No. Did you check whether Nico Schaffer was still in the country? Harvey shifted in his seat. We acted on available intelligence. Intelligence from 2023. 2-year-old intelligence. Knight slid a document across the table. Intelligence that would have taken you 15 minutes to verify as outdated. The government's defense tried to paint Wade as non-compliant, suggesting his refusal to immediately comply had escalated the situation. But Knight had the body cam footage, the same image that would later become the face of the lawsuit. Wade standing calm in his doorway, one hand on the frame, asking reasonable questions, showing no aggression. The jury would see that image and know exactly who the real threat had been. The trial lasted 8 days. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. When they filed back into the courtroom, Wade reached for Matilda's hand. River and Gabriella sitting in the row behind them, holding their breath like the rest of the room. The foreperson stood, a middle-aged woman who had listened to every word of testimony with her arms crossed and her eyes sharp. We find in favor of the plaintiff, Dr. Wade Jacobson. We award compensatory damages in the amount of $3.2 million for Fourth Amendment violations, emotional distress, and property damage. We award punitive damages in the amount of $5.4 million to deter future misconduct. Total award, $8.6 million. The courtroom erupted. Wade closed his eyes, Matilda's hand trembling in his. River let out a breath that sounded like a sob. Gabriella whispered, "We won. We actually won." Ben Bentley squeezed Wade's shoulder, his face professionally neutral, but his eyes bright with vindication. Across the aisle, the government attorneys sat stone-faced, already preparing appeals that would go nowhere. Outside on the courthouse steps, Wade stood with his family, cameras flashing, reporters shouting questions. He thought about that Tuesday morning, about the sound of his door being broken, about his daughter's scream and his son's tears. He thought about every family who hadn't had a Ring camera, hadn't had the resources to fight back, hadn't been believed. "Your home is your castle," Wade said into the microphones, his voice steady and clear. "And no badge, no quota, no operation gives anyone the right to kick it down without cause. Know your rights. If they don't have a warrant signed by a judge, you don't have to open that door. And if they break it down anyway, document everything. Because accountability isn't optional. It's constitutional."